My name is Helen, and this is my story.
I really feel like getting here to this moment in my life was kind of a roller coaster. Like, I do feel like God had everything to do with that. Getting here was God in every single little moment. Like, there is no way that I would have found PCC or Powhatan without God saying, here's the door that I want you to walk through, and like shoving me through it. So I ended up in Powhatan from Southern California. I went to school to be an English major. And my dream was to work with Disney and make all the magic happen. And God's dream was so different than that. God provided a way to move to the East Coast with my family, and he did not provide a way to stay in California. Through that, I actually ended up, like, God essentially dropped a job as being a teacher in my lap, and I took that and have been praying and running with that ever since. I mean, it's been such a huge change, but I would never have ended up here if God hadn't been like, this is exactly where I want you. At the time, I don't think I really knew it was God telling me where to go. I think things seemed to fit in a way that I couldn't have necessarily done on my own. But I think in the moment, it doesn't always feel like God. In the moment, like, you're praying and you're saying, are you sure this is what I'm supposed to do? And in the moment, it doesn't always feel like God until you kind of reflect back and look backwards and go, okay, God, I'm listening. I'm here, I did it. I was raised in the church, and so, Sunday school every Sunday, and youth group, and college group, and all of that, but I really think personally, my faith journey really began when I graduated high school. I think having to learn outside of that bubble of your parents waking you up and going to church and going to these functions, I think having to do that on my own and discovering that I had a faith myself and discovering that God was there for me and God was there through the journey that I was on was really impactful. I think joining a small group in college and joining with friends who had faith as well, like being able to be with that group of people led me on a journey with God that had always seemed like I was going through the motions before, and then really blossomed into my own journey with God. Moving from California to Virginia, I needed God. There was no way I could do it without God, just because it's a huge transition, and leaving behind like some of the really good relationships I had in California was really hard. I had built those, and God had helped really form those friendships and form those relationships. And so leaving that behind and coming to Virginia was scary. It was really, really terrifying, and I had to believe that God was going to provide a church, was going to provide the church family that I wanted, was going to provide those small groups and those relationships that I could like help grow in him and make those same friendships here. Like, that was such a scary leap. I would just like pray all the time. I would pray in my car. I would pray when I was going to sleep. I would pray like through before I went into a church. Like, I would pray through situations and just be like, God, I know you're here, but I need you to show me what I'm doing. I felt God's presence the most when I moved to Farmville, tiny little town, and I had no idea there was a PCC campus there. And I really felt God's presence when I was invited to come to the PCC campus in Farmville, because I had always felt connected at PCC in Powhatan, and I had been so nervous to move to a small town and so nervous to find connections. And I really think like when I realized there was a PCC in Farmville, I was like, okay, God, like, okay, this is where you want me. Okay. Like, I was like, I just felt this sense of peace, I think, that I knew he was right in that moment. Growing up in the church, it's easy to just assume that you have faith automatically. It's so easy to just assume that you're a believer. It's easy, like, you're like, oh yeah, I know the Bible. I know exactly what I'm doing. But I really think I had a friend in high school who really struggled with addiction and depression. And I remember just one day sitting in the backyard with him, and he was trying to ask like why life was worth living. And I remember looking at him, and I didn't have an answer that seemed big enough. I knew that I wanted him to be okay. Like, I knew that I wanted him to be able to get through this, and I knew that there was life on the other side of this moment. But I remember like just taking a deep breath and saying, you know what, I know tonight is hard, but like, will you come to youth group with me on Wednesday? Like, and I didn't really know what else to say. Like, I knew church had always been there for me, and my friend came on Wednesday, and every Wednesday after that for the next 3 years of high school. In that moment, I knew that God was bigger than anything ever, and it seemed really simple to just say, will you come to church with me? And it wasn't a magic cure for everything going on in his life, but I was able to look at him and look at who he has become and be like, God is right there. And I think, you know, a lot of times growing up in church, like, everything is like bright and sunny and there aren't hard things. And seeing that other people were struggling and being able to like lean on God and know who to go to, like knowing that God is there. I think that was such a huge thing for me. Like, it wasn't that I didn't know God was real, but that was something where I was like, okay, God is here. This is it. I think growing up in church, you know, it's, you believe what the pastor says, you believe what the Sunday school teacher says, you believe what your parents at home say. And I didn't do a lot of deep dive into my own faith. I didn't do a lot of devotions. I didn't spend a lot of time in the Word. And as I realized, as I was graduating high school and realized that I was going off on my own, I wasn't going to be at my parents' church. I wasn't going to have the youth group. I needed to find my own church. I needed to find my own groups. I really started to pray and spend time in what I needed to do to get there. I found this really great devotional on women in the Bible, and I just started there. And I asked a couple of friends in college if they wanted to join. We like created our own little small group, and it was really just like, we would go to church together. Like we church hopped for weeks until we could all like check all of our individual boxes. And we got involved in a church, and I was able to talk to God without feeling like I was having to go through a certain formula. Like, it wasn't something, you know, it wasn't the same formula that the pastor had told me was the right way. It wasn't the same formula like my parents, you know, we say the same prayer at dinner time. It was like, I felt like I could have conversations with God, and that's when I really began to be able to see it as my faith, not just, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I've been in church since I was born, you know, and really being able to like evolve from the traditional, I go to Sunday school because my parents wake me up and they make me go to Sunday school, and waking up and saying, I'm excited to go to church today. I'm excited to be in my small group. I'm excited to get this new devotional or go on this journey with people. Having conversations with God, I really take on the idea that God is a friend. I ramble so much when I pray. Like, I don't even start and stop the way a normal prayer is. I ramble like I'm having a conversation with a friend, and I'll just talk and talk. I talk about what's going on. I talk about what's bothering me. I talk about the good things that happen. Sometimes if I'm making a big decision, I literally just talk through my pro and con list. If somebody heard me, they'd probably be like, oh my gosh, that wacko is talking to herself all the time. Like, what are you doing? But I just really believe that God is there for us no matter what. And so I just figure, you know, as long as we're talking to him, he's there and he's listening. And so I just talk in like a conversational chat with God. When God speaks, it is not the way I ever imagined. Like, it's not bold letter. It's not like a loud voice from the sky. I know that when I moved to Farmville and got settled, like, I heard God say, this is right. Like, I had been praying for community. I had been praying for a good church. I had been praying for friends and, like, strong connections for so many years as I settled in to a new state and settled into a new place. And it kind of all fell into place when I moved and got involved in PCC. Like, it all just fell in, and I was like, okay. And I really heard God saying, this is where you're supposed to be. I know I've struggled. I work as a teacher. I've struggled a lot with wanting to know if I'm in the right place. Is this the right thing for me? Is this where I'm supposed to be? And every year school starts, and every year I look around and I hear God say, this is where I want you. Like, this is where I've put you. This is where I want you to be. And every year I'm like, okay, God, like, let's do this. But it's so weird because I always was like, well, you know, there's no burning bush. There's no, like, clouds in the sky. It's just kind of this, like, feeling of right. I did everything in my power not to be a teacher. I actually wrote a paper in college to a professor about why I wasn't going to be a teacher. Like, I wrote a paper because he had told me in class one day that I would be the perfect teacher. And my next paper that I wrote for him was 10 pages of why I was not going to be a teacher. I think I really felt like it was something, there's so much pressure. There's so much pressure, and I didn't think I wanted it. I didn't think that I was the right person for that. And nothing else was clicking. Before teaching, I did a few other things. Like, I worked in marketing, I worked in communications, I worked in government relations, and nothing else felt right. And then I started substituting on the side, and I was like, I came home from the very first day of substitute teaching, and I walked in and I called my mom and I said, I have some bad news. And I was like, it turns out I'm gonna go be a teacher, and I just signed up for a master's program, and I'm gonna be in debt forever. But I was like, but it turns out this is what I was supposed to do. And I was like, I could have saved us all this decision if I had just done it during undergrad. So sorry. And my mom just laughed. She was like, we told you so. And God also told me so, but he let me run around in circles for a while before he was like, no, here you go. I'm gonna put you right here. Talking to God every year at the start of each school year, and, like, knowing that I had other things in mind, it's really kind of hard because I love what I do. Each year, I get to be part of this change, this next generation. But it's just as much pressure, if not more, than I was afraid it was going to be. And it's scary. And I'm like, don't you want me to do something that's a little less intimidating? I'm like, God, don't you want me to do something that's a little less forming the next version of children, and, like, maybe something a little less risky? I'm like, what happened? Like, it's a lot. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I, like, make some big mistake and then they don't learn something and they can't do it and then they're not good citizens? Like, it's just a lot. But I think in my heart, I know that's where God wants me, and I do love it. It's not that I don't, it's just that it's scary. And sometimes what God wants us to do and where God wants us to be is scary. I spend a large portion of my day praying to God, even if it's just in my head, like, even if it's not out loud, even if it's just, like, something will come up and I'm just like, oh God, how are we gonna do this? What are we gonna do? What are we doing with this one? Because I know, like, I fully believe that this is what he wants for me. Like, I fully believe that God has spoken and said, this is where I want you. And I'm like, okay, well, you cannot leave me here. Like, how are we handling this? Like, tell me what to do. And you know what? He's never let me down. Like, God has provided all of the resources I have asked for. Every time I sit back and go, I don't know how I'm going to handle this, like, God has provided a way for me to handle it. And so he hasn't let me down at all. I never walked away from my faith. I definitely let my faith fall by the wayside. It was just something that, especially in high school, I didn't think about as much. Like, it was something that was just so routine. Like, I was like, well, I'm a Christian and I know that I love God, but it wasn't something I was actively engaged with. There were some times in high school where, like, I really struggled with depression and I really struggled with mental health, and I couldn't always find God in those situations, and it was very hard to try to actively have faith when I was struggling so much I didn't see him. Like, I didn't see where he was in those situations. And so I wasn't actively trying to build my faith. I wasn't actively trying to talk to God. I felt kind of like he had left me in the dark. And so it wasn't that I abandoned my faith. I never ever went through a time where I said, I don't believe in God. But there were times where I felt like it was just a routine, or I felt like he wasn't there when I needed him. I think struggling with mental health, and especially being a teenager and being in high school, it was hard because I didn't know how to ask for what I needed. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know what I needed, and so I didn't know where to go to ask for the help. And so, quite honestly, like, it was not until college that I really was able to get the help I needed. It wasn't until I was able to connect with a counselor and connect with a faith-based group on the college campus. And part of that journey was, and it seems like kind of silly now to say when I look back, but it was so big, was being able to work at Disney and be able to, like, have gone and kind of, like, manifested this, like, life for myself where I was like, I'm gonna work at Disney. I live in California. It's gonna be perfect. And to be quite honest, it kind of, like, it was, like, and so being able to be on my own, and that's where I really started to build my faith on my own, like, being able to be in a place where counseling didn't seem like it was shameful. It didn't seem like it was a big deal. Like, everybody has a therapist, and so, like, being able to be in college and on my own and be able to find those resources with the help of friends, with the help of a pastor on campus, those were really impactful, and those were really big things for me. And I was able to work through that and be able to find God in those moments and really be able to connect with him and understand more about myself. And it's not, like, things don't magically go away. Like, people still struggle even when God is there, but I think when you know that God is there through that struggle, and you know the resources and you know what you need to do, it doesn't go away, but it is certainly more manageable. Being able to lead students is so amazing. Like, understanding where they're coming from and knowing that when I was their age, I didn't know where to look. I didn't have resources. Like, I just didn't know where to get them. I didn't know you could go to your youth pastor and say, hey, I'm really struggling. Like, I really need your help. Like, I need your help talking to my parents, I didn't know that was an option. And so it's really important to me with our students to let them know, like, they have a safe place to come. They have a place where they can come. They have someone who understands them, and, like, someone who is going to be there with hard conversations with parents, be there with resources, be there to just listen. Like, just giving them a space where they have someone to talk to is so important to me, because I know how important that would have been to teenage me, and, like, what a difference that would have made. I think the biggest thing about your faith journey is knowing that God is really patient. Like, there is no timeline. There is no formula. Like, God is just there. He wants to listen. It's not, you don't have to pray the right prayer. You don't have to say the right things. You don't have to wear certain things. You don't have to act a certain way. Like, God is there for you as you are. and he wants you to go on that journey with him. Like, God is there for the whole journey. Like, God is there to talk to ask questions to. Like, God is there if you are frustrated and you just want to, like, vent. Like, God is there through the whole thing. And I just think it's so important to know that finding your people, like, finding a group of people who you can go on a journey with, who you trust and who you can talk to and ask your questions and aren't going to judge you, is such a big part of going on any faith journey. And I think just really understanding that it's your journey. It's not someone else's. It's not compared to anyone else's. Like, it's all yours, and it's going to look different for everybody.